compliments of the season.
Same to
Looking
you.
forward to the 2019 edition of The Fix. I don't think a more important year it'll be for it to have a show like yours. And I'm so glad you're with me to talk about, it seems like another drama and another ANC list which seems to be going awry. Why do we keep having this conversation every election year?
Well, I think it's because we're dealing with a deeply divided governing party. As I said yesterday, what we're seeing in KwaZulu-Natal over this period, where the Nationalist Conference is being held by a specially convened National Executive Committee, is that Cyril Ramaphosa has to have machinery to put in place to win the elections. And in order to do that, he needs maximum unity in the party. However, he can't choose the African National Congress over South Africans. He also needs to clean up the party, and that's the tension that they have to deal with. And of course, we've seen in branches and in provinces the deep contestation that goes right down to the ground level. You just replayed a clip yesterday of someone from Northwest saying they're not responsible for the delay. I mean, that's a complete lie, in fact. They are responsible for the delay. Suprama Mapela was removed as the premier because there were, in fact, protests there in the Northwest. The province was essentially put under administration because of the deep-seated corruption that was happening. And then, of course, the NEC took the decision to remove him as chair. But he was made part of the PTT to have that unity approach to solving the problems. And he, of course, withdrew from the PTT. So he is now in a position to say, you can't hold me responsible because I'm a part of the PTT. But he is at the center of the delay. But what Jesse Duarte also said earlier in the clip that you played is really important in terms of the rules of how the candidates are selected. The discussions in the Northwest has no bearing on the discussions at eThekwini. What is happening in eThekwini is the national to nationalists. This is people who are going to the National Assembly. The process in the Northwest is who is going to the provincial legislature. And PECs, that is political councils in the provinces don't have the competency, they don't have the power to make decisions about the nationalists. That is the function of the NEC, and that is what I said yesterday to the audiences, that the ANC is going to stagger this process. So it may look as if there is a contradiction that is happening, but they can actually manage the national to nationalist process, because in terms of the resolution taken at conference, provincial executives don't have any say on who goes to the national list. That is the competency of the NEC. But at the root of the mess, Gareth, is a deeply divided organization and a concerted fight back by those who was associated with President Jacob Zuma and implicated in state capture.
And Samkelel Maseko, I believe you're joining us now as well for the very latest. You've obviously been covering this. I'm sure you've been listening to Karima and I speaking this afternoon. Samkelel, I think you are with me. Hello to you, Sam. You've been following what the ANC itself is doing. There you are. We see you now. Are you getting a sense then that this is a highly divided ANC going into 2019?
Well, the sense I'm getting is that the list processes, particularly for the national to national, is particularly heated. There's a huge generational battle ongoing there, and there is a huge realignment that is currently taking place in the province, where you've got former allies. For instance, I spoke to one of the prominent figures in the ANC's top brass, who was speaking to me, basically reflecting on the issue of Malusi Nkanyezi Gigaba, who the former Minister of Home Affairs, who resigned and later on resigned as an MP, saying that it's basically going to be very difficult for Malusi Gigaba to go back to the National Assembly. This comes from a person who was in that so-called Premier League faction which Malusi Gigaba belonged to, and later on basically was pretty much cagey on which side he's supporting between Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma and the faction that was purported to be that of President Cyril Ramaphosa now. So he finds himself without the backing of the then notorious Premiers League and without the backing of the now incumbent faction, if one may put it like that, of the Cyril Ramaphosa faction within the presidency. So you have him where he is pretty much in the limbo and it's pretty much doesn't have a solid base on the ground when it comes to regions. So he may find himself out in the limbo. So he may not have that backing of the younger generation in the form of Ronald Lamula, Babalo Matigizela from the Eastern Cape, Oscar Mabuyane from the Eastern Cape, and other provinces such as Gauteng. When it comes to the likes of Lebohang Maile, he may have the backing of Ekurhuleni in the form of Mzwandile Masina, but Mzwandile Masina is not an active participant in the vetting process, which is now currently ongoing. So the issue of Bathabile Dlamini hangs in the balance. The issue of Malusi Kikaba hangs in the balance. The issue of Fikile Mbalula as well, after this issue of the Public Protector's report, which he now wants to take on review. But I'm just going to move across and ask my colleague Bonga to come with me. I'm first going to ask these members of society what they think of these statues. This is just an issue that is happening on the sidelines of the list conference, and then we will surely get to the issue of the list conference and whether they have confidence in Malusi Kikaba, Fikile Mbalula, Bathabile Dlamini. The first question, your views on these statues of your former presidents, and particularly in a largely gender-based country where there's patriarchy, the two female comrades or former leaders of the ANC are placed at the back of men. What's your view?
To me, previously, it was like this. That is the setup previously. And then women are put at the back, simply because they represent the Women's League, not that they are the ANC leaders, but they represent the Women's League.
What is your view of the current ongoing national list conference currently taking place of public representatives, whom I presume you are an ANC supporter and voter? What's your view of the current debates going on around Fikile Mbalula, Malusi Kikaba, Bathabile Dlamini, all who have been found wanting, and some have court judgments against them or may allude to that they have lied and not been truthful to South Africans and also participated in state capture and corruption? I'm not saying they're guilty, but their names are being thrown into allegations of fraud, corruption and state capture.
I really have no answer for that, but the only... No comment on that one. But I will say the list conference is still ongoing.
Yes.
It hasn't been finalized. The list conference hasn't been finalized. Nothing has been said about anybody. So it has not yet confirmed. We can't really confirm or speculate, really.
My question is, what type of cadership would you want as a South African and as a voter to represent you in the National Assembly? Does those people who are named in that national to national preliminary list that is sent out imbue the characteristics of Cyril Ramaphosa, of Thabo Mbeki, of Nelson Mandela, of Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela, of Ubabu Dube, one of the founders of the African National Congress and the first president of the African National Congress? Do they imbue that legacy and that rich history of the ANC?
What I would say is, for now, it's still speculations. We can't really conclude. As a supporter of ANC, I can't really conclude as to they are guilty or not. We should just wait for the process to end, and then from there, we can maybe decide as to what maybe we are proud of what's going on, and maybe take actions on that as to maybe what we can do with them as we are voting next year. No, actually this year.
And branches will decide. And branches of the ANC will decide.
I'm just going to move it across. I'm just going to ask this particular gentleman. Sorry, sir. I just want to ask this particular gentleman. When you look at the current debates currently ongoing in the city, of the ANC's national to national list conference. What do you think of those names who are being purported to become public representatives in this upcoming 2019 general elections? When you hear the names of Batabile Dlamini, Malusi Kikaba, Fikile Mbalula, what do you think?
I'd love to participate. I'm actually just a visitor from another country, so I don't even know the people that you're talking about. Okay, sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Thank you very much, sir. Well, he seems to be a visitor and does not particularly know South African politics, but the ANC supporters and some of the voters we spoke to are basically saying that the list processes have not yet been concluded. That's currently ongoing at the Coastlands Hotel. The ANC will finalize that process, and they do not want to cast aspersions or to say that Malusi Kikaba, Batabile Dlamini, and all of those who may have court judgments in their ministerial positions, whom they once held, who are adverse, they saying that they may not want to say they must not go back to the National Assembly until the ANC's national list conference is concluded and the ANC SG, Ace Magashule, has given the final word.
All right, Samkelel Maseko, perhaps don't go anywhere for the moment. I'm going to continue talking to Karima. Maybe you can find someone who actually knows about the politicians you're referring to. Maybe don't go anywhere for now. It's live television, Karima. You get someone who's not even sure who these politicians are, and perhaps that's very worrying. Not for the gentleman who was from overseas, but those people that Samkelel was speaking to. It seems to be this impression that even though there are these accusations and aspersions, I think is the word that Samkelel used, on these certain individuals, Malusi Kikaba being the one that comes up repeatedly, everyone seems to be perfectly fine with these names being put onto lists, even though they've got these dark spots on their names.
Mm-hmm. The point, Gareth, is that the African National Congress, in many instances, you will see people going to court about legitimate branches or not. And there are many fake branches in the ANC. That's one of the reasons, for example, why the Northwest List Conference is postponed. They had to authenticate which are real branches. And of course, this has to do with the project of state capture. President Jacob Zuma basically trying to replicate the ANC in his image, and he did it in the provinces with the help of people like Mapela and so on. So these comments are not unsurprising because, like the veterans of the African National Congress said, the real ANC is actually locked out of this process in many ways. So I'm not surprised that there are people who think that people who have been recommended for investigation for stealing from the poor, people who have been found to be lying in court, like Malusi Kikaba, should stand again, because often those are people who are part of branches that are actually fake branches of the ANC. The conference resolution is very, very clear. You are not in a position to stand if you have a criminal conviction after 1996. You do not have the ability to stand if you can't pass through what they call the eye of the needle. And the eye of the needle is essentially a set of ethical rules and traits and characteristics of leadership. And of course, you can't bring the organization into disrepute. You can't have scandal. So, for example, on the list that I have in front of me, you have names like Musibenzi Zwane, who was, of course, at the heart of state capture. You have names like former President Jacob Zuma. And, of course, these are people who simply don't make the cut, not in terms of our opinion, but in terms of the ANC's actual rules of who can be elected. And the people also have to still be vetted. So the popularity or the populism that you find in some of the branches in the African National Congress is not going to be the final arbiter of who emerges out of this list. This list is going to go through a series of scrutinies, and it will have to tick certain boxes. And some of these individuals, however popular they may be, because the branches, many of the branches have in fact been bought, is not going to count as a factor on whether or not they make it to the final list.
And we'll obviously unpack that final list when we get there, but as you say, it's about traits and personalities and characteristics, a very subjective way of looking at politicians. And perhaps as a final question to you as we begin to wrap this up, Karima, what does this mean for brand ANC, though? They're going into a massive election year, Ramaphosa at the helm of this. what does this say about brand ANC? Yes, it'll go through the eye of the needle, as you call it, but what does it mean for the ANC brand when they're looking at someone that is questionable in the public eye? What do they do there? What do you tell them?
Can you imagine, Gareth, that President Cyril Ramaphosa goes around and campaigns and says, we're cleaning up the state, we're cleaning up state capture, we're stabilizing the state, but have to explain Jacob Zuma's presence on the list. It is a contradiction in terms. So for the African National Congress's brand, these people cannot be on it because the ANC has already lost 3 major municipalities, and it has to have its eye on the big prize, which is not ANC membership, but the entire voting base. And it's that base that must be convinced. That message must land properly, because remember, it's not just ANC members who are voting. This is a general election. This is the country at large. Thousands of people took to the street, for example, to say Jacob Zuma must be removed. Remember, he was supposed to serve his term out. He was still supposed to be state president now. But things were so bad that he actually had to be removed. So I don't think that brand ANC can survive the likes of people like Mosibenzi Zwane, Batabile Dlamini, Jacob Zuma, Lynn Brown, Malusi Gigaba, people who have been central to the capturing of the state, which of course was described akin to a coup, and which cost the country R1 trillion, which cost the country 1.2 million jobs. I don't think that those names can be good for brand ANC, and I think Cyril Ramaphosa has made it very clear that it is the South African population that matters. But like I said, in order to win the elections, he needs a machinery. And of course, for that, he needs an organization that is as united as possible. But it cannot be built on a fake unity, because it simply won't land well with the supporters and the members and citizens at large.
Absolutely. Karima Brown, thank you so very much indeed for coming in to speak to us.